Welcome everyone to your weekly update on the activities of the Nigerian Parliament. Welcome to the Gavel. I'm Terry Ikumi. Now, for those who don't already know, the National Assembly has embarked on its annual recess to be back on the 17th of September. Both chambers adjourned on Tuesday, the 23rd of July. Now, although only one plenary session held this week, it was packed full. Lawmakers quickly amended the Police Act, the Finance Act, the 2024 budget, and the Minimum Wage Act, following a correspondence transmitted by President Bola Tinubu. So let's begin this week by taking a look at the processes leading up to the passage of these amendment bills. Take a listen.
The proceedings.
Lawmakers in the upper chamber resumed for the first plenary of the week with a loaded agenda,
Consideration of this submission.
top of which was a correspondence from President Bola Tinubu seeking expedited consideration and passage of the National Minimum Wage Bill. Without further ado, the lawmakers unanimously voted in favor as the bill speedily scaled both second and third reading.
A bill for an act to amend the National Minimum Wage Act 2019 and to increase the national minimum wage and reduce the time for periodic review of the national minimum wage from 5 years to 3 years and for related matters 2024. Third reading.
Similarly, the executive bill enjoyed the backing of the lawmakers in the House of Representatives. Moments later, the leader of the Senate announced the defection of one senator from the Labour Party to the All Progressives Congress.
Strangers are coming in to witness the cross-carpeting of one of our distinguished colleagues.
The upper chamber subsequently suspended its rules to admit Governor Hope Uzodinma of Imo State, who was present, to witness the defection of Senator Onyewuchi Ezenwa, representing Imo East Senatorial District. In the meantime, a bill for an act to amend the Nigeria Police Act 2020, seeking to enable a person appointed to the office to remain in office until the end of the stipulated term, scaled second and third reading.
This bill is only seeking to guarantee the tenure of office of the Inspector General of Police without prejudice to the various provisions in the Police Act as to the procedure for removal of the Inspector General of Police where he is found wanting.
It's rather unfortunate that in this country we've not been able to formulate set and steady rules aimed at strengthening the police as a service and protecting the office of the Inspector General of Police. It is not for nothing, Mr. President and my dear colleagues, that whereas the Constitution of the Federal Republic says that a president, any president of this country, is commander-in-chief of the armed forces, the Constitution does not say so of the police. The police is a different service altogether, a service that is intended to work for the people, for the due enforcement of the laws and for maintenance of peace and order.
Is there any clause anywhere that subjects the stay in office by the IGP to good conduct, to performance? Because, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, until people given appointments perform satisfactorily, when we simply give them the opportunity to serve as far as the tenure in the letter indicates, I think that will be abused because somebody will feel he will not be removed, regardless.
Meanwhile, the Senate and the House approved a 6.2 trillion naira amendment to the 2024 Appropriation Act, raising the budget from 28.7 trillion naira to 35.5 trillion. Both chambers also passed the Finance Act Amendment Bill 2023 to impose and charge 70% windfall levy on banks. During Tuesday's plenary session in the Green Chamber, the attention of the House was drawn to the concerns in the midstream and downstream sector as a lawmaker raises alarm over what he described as unguarded utterances of the Chief Executive of the Petroleum Regulatory Authority.
The House is also concerned that the unguarded statement by the Chief Executive of this agency, which has since been disapproved, sparks an outrage of Nigerians who tagged his undemning and local refineries as insistence on the continued importation of fuel, an act of economic sabotage, as the imported products have been shown to contain high levels of dangerous compounds. Mr. Speaker, the House resolves to call the federal government to suspend the Chief Executive of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Authority pending conclusive investigations into the allegations against the authority.
The motions were amended and adopted.
The motion be referred to the ad hoc committee set up by this House,
Honorable Kusada,
to investigate the allegations against the MD.
Another urgent matter before the House called on the Nursing and Midwifery Council of Nigeria to commence verification of nurses and midwives.
This House resolves to urge the Nursing and Midwifery Council of Nigeria to open its
order, please,
and commence verification of nurses and midwives based on its former guidelines, not the revised guidelines for verification dated February 7, 2023, pending the conclusion of investigation by the House Committee on Health Institutions.
In the meantime, the House considered a report from its Committee on Power and adopted the suspension of the hike in electricity tariff.
Now, the National Assembly may be officially on recess, but the lawmakers have targets with their committee assignments, so they continue to hold public and investigative hearings. At one of those hearings, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, declared that the commission is capable of successfully conducting local government elections if saddled with the responsibility to do so by law. At another hearing, it was revealed that the federal government has spent over $1.5 billion since 2020 to curb crude oil theft. Take a listen.
The Special Committee on Crude Oil Theft, set up by the leadership of the House of Representatives, held a 2-day public and investigative hearing on all dimensions of crude oil theft and losses. This hearing is necessitated by the instability rocking the oil and gas sector, which has continued to negatively affect the revenue of the country.
We have identified that firepower and other weapons of engagement are grossly inadequate compared to the number of security operatives drafted to combat armed crude oil thieves. In the light of these findings, our committee has resolved to enact adequate legislations, including budget allocations, to support security agencies, improve existing laws to combat crude oil theft.
The report of the Nigerian Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative (NATI), which shows that over $46 billion was lost due to stolen crude between 2009 and 2020, is a major concern for the government.
The government has invested considerable resources in combating this menace. Since 2020, expenditure aimed at addressing crude oil theft and securing our oil infrastructure has exceeded $1.5 billion.
We expect that 70% of what is being stolen are being exported. So we come across three types of losses: the engineering losses that we know of, the actual losses, which is the hydrocarbon that is being stolen or being lost in the environment, and as well as the opportunity losses. The combination of that culminated as of that time to about 700,000 barrels.
The people who are supporting this in this space are known. They are known by names, they are known by companies, they are known by account details.
In declaring the event open, the Speaker of the House, represented by the Deputy Speaker, also raises an alarm over the theft in the oil and gas sector and its effect on national development.
It is estimated that between January and July 2024, Nigeria lost an average of 437,000 barrels of crude oil per day due to theft, vandalism, and other criminal activities. At the current price of oil, this translates to over $10 billion over this period of 7 months. I wonder how a government that loses about $10 billion in 7 months could be expected to meet up with its responsibilities for the citizens.
Similarly, in the Senate, an investigation into the petroleum sector has kicked off as the leader of the Senate, Okweyemi Bamidele, who doubles as chairman of the ad hoc committee, revealed plans to summon key players.
The committee, along with Nigerians, is particularly interested in understanding why local refineries are not working, despite the substantial amount of money spent annually on their maintenance and operation. We will closely examine what the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited has been doing to address this persistent problem.
In the event of a failure of a person or an entity to show up when summoned, the Senate can issue a warrant to the Inspector General of Police to compel that corporation or entity to make itself available to this subcommittee.
Meanwhile, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission as well as national commissioners appeared before a joint committee on electoral matters over the upcoming governorship elections in Edo and Ondo states.
Power of incumbency is used.
The meeting also afforded him the opportunity to comment on the possibility of the electoral body conducting elections for local governments following the Supreme Court's judgment on the autonomy of local governments.
If this responsibility for conduct of local government election is transferred to INEC, can INEC cope? The answer is yes, INEC can cope. So if we are asked to do these elections, yes, we can. And our track record actually proves that we can do it.
Reacting to more questions during the no-bar session, the INEC boss explained its preparedness ahead of the governorship elections.
We have 57 days to the opening of polls in Edo State. And we have 113 days to the election in Ondo State. Is the commission prepared for the election? We are prepared for the election. We've learned valuable lessons, and Nigerians should expect to keep seeing tremendous improvement.
The INEC boss also appealed to lawmakers to speedily pass the National Electoral Offenders Bill to empower the Commission to make arrests and investigate electoral offenders. The House of Representatives and 27 state houses of assembly, including ministers, have resolved to end malnutrition and food insecurity in the country with adequate collaboration. This was at the instance of the House of Representatives Committee on Nutrition and Food Security during the inauguration of the National Legislative Network on Nutrition and Food Security in Abuja on Monday.
The food insecurity in Nigeria has worsened. There is, however, cause for optimism. The optimism we share stems from the fact that, for the first time, attempts to tackle malnutrition and food insecurity will have a legislative push. Furthermore, this legislative perspective will be driven collectively and holistically, anchored on the joint effort of the committee and the national and state houses of assembly, driven by a joint work plan with flexibility for incorporation of state-specific exigencies.
Of course, we understand that this is a very challenging prospect to actually eradicate it, considering the statistics and the data that we've heard today, Nigeria being the #1 deprived country in the whole of Africa when it comes to nourishment for our kids, ourselves, and our future.
Despite these challenges, there are ongoing efforts by state and non-state actors to ameliorate the rising nutrition crisis in Nigeria. The federal government, through the National Council on Nutrition, which is chaired by His Excellency the Vice President of Nigeria, and serve at the Secretariat of the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, and stakeholders are partnering to provide solutions for the malnutrition crisis in Nigeria.
Now, welcome back to the Gavel. Let's take you back to our first report on the speedy passage of the Finance Act and the 2024 budget. Here's the position of the Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, PLAC, on both bills. Here's the breakdown.
I think Nigeria's budgeting process needs to be reformed. You have a system where budgets don't seem to be innovative and don't seem to be crafted for development. Year in, year out, you see the same budget heads in the national budget. Budgets are repeated, the same items. Recurrence continues to grow. Capital development and investment continues to decrease. I don't think that an economy can develop in the way it is. A bigger concern even is that budgets are not being implemented when they are made, which accounts for why this country is not told that the country is paying subsidy for petrol, because this wasn't captured in the budget. The president, on taking over power, said subsidy is gone forever. So where are we getting money, or where's the money coming from to subsidize petrol when it is not in the budget? So on budgeting, there's a first major concern that governments in this country do not implement the budget. A second thing is that you cannot run in theory 3 or 4 different budgets in one fiscal year, and that's what the government is doing, which I consider to be fiscally irresponsible. You cannot have a situation where nobody knows whether you are taking money from one budget head 1 year or the next year, or in a full budget or in a supplementary budget. The fact that we don't know means that we don't even know where revenues are coming from and how revenues are balanced out against the budget of against the expenditure. In search for money, the current fiscal budget, supplementary act on and the finance bill is creating new taxation. It's requiring that banks that have made profits from a certain head of expenditure or activity are taxed 50% of it. In an economy that's in a downturn, in an economy that's depressed, taxation further depresses the economy. What you've done is target a particular sector of business. You are taxing them in a manner that is unfair. And we can't say, because banks are seen to be very profit-laden, that they should be taxed arbitrarily. None of these businesses are created to provide slush funds for running of government business. You don't just take a sector and tax them. There must be a process, there must be consultation, and then it must be justified. So what we see banks being taxed means that banks that Nigerians already have a lot of complaints about. If you check your bank balance, you get deductions from your bank balance, some up to 12, some up to 15 deductions by banks already. So now you put this tax on the banks, what will they do? They will find and be creative in finding additional deductions to make on citizens' accounts, which means that ultimately it's not the banks that are going to pay this new 50% taxation. It's still the citizens who are already very impoverished. I would hope and think that the banks should challenge this in court, because it is completely wrong economic decision. What is the National Assembly doing passing bills in a couple of minutes? It is undemocratic, and I think the National Assembly is treading a very dangerous path when citizens feel that those that they have elected into office are not able to protect them. There is no democracy in the world where a parliament passes bills in a couple of minutes, as we have seen the National Assembly do in recent times. So the National Assembly needs to be very cautious, need to understand that they cannot continue on this path of receiving bills from the executive, sitting down for a couple of minutes or an hour or two and passing those bills into law. It is not democratic, and if we have a National Assembly that doesn't show its democratic credentials, then it is endangering itself.
And on Constituency Focus this week, Senator Manu Haruna, representing Taraba Central Senatorial District, is on the hot seat to explain his impact as a federal lawmaker on his senatorial district.
As legislator, we don't need to be urged. We've always been intervening when it comes to when people are in their needs. And that period wasn't an exception. So I intervened in my constituency, and so also many senators too. And my constituents are very, very happy with the intervention. During my campaign, part of what my constituent asked, my constituency, let me say, my senatorial district, maybe perhaps is the only senatorial district that is not connected to the national grid. Out of the 5 local governments that I'm representing, just 1 local government is connected. That's my local government, which I connected when I was the deputy governor then. But the remaining 4 local governments are not connected to the national grid. And throughout the campaign period, especially the youths, that's what we've been saying. We want to be connected to the national grid. And thank God, in this budget, in the budget of 2023, one of the local governments, there is a funding to connect that local government to the national grid. And then now that supplementary too is coming, the second local government is coming. So I think this is one of the major things that, especially during my campaign, my constituents have been asking. Of course, the second issue is the issue of the Mambila. I happen to come from that senatorial district where the famous Mambila hydroelectric power project is cited. This is one project that is very, very dear to my heart, to ensure that the whole of Taraba Central is being connected to the national grid. And I'm sure in the next 2 budget cycle, by the special grace of God, Taraba Central will be connected to the national grid. If there is any project, if there is one single project that I want to achieve, is to ensure that Taraba Central is connected to the national grid, because currently we are the only senatorial district in the whole of Federation that is not connected to the national grid. Of course, there are other projects. For example, we have like the Takalapia projects and road projects and even the Mambila continuation of the Gashaka to Sardauna road, because it's a federal road. And of course, there are so many, the Jalingo Yola road too, is dilapidated. Yola to Numan, Jalingo to Mutumbiu to Ukari. These are major projects, road projects that are on trunk A road. And those roads are not passable now. And they are major trunk A roads. So we hope that during our time in the National Assembly, the federal government will look into those roads.
Well, that's the Gavel this week. But just before we go, the general consensus by the National Assembly on the planned nationwide protest is that it should not happen. They want the Tinubu administration to be given a little more time, and the opposition lawmakers in the House are urging the president to pursue dialogue with the proponents of the protests. Well, let's see how impactful these appeals will be. Well, thanks for your time. I'm Terry Ikumi. Goodbye.